You had $12,000 in the market. Then it dropped. Fast. Red across every line. So you did the thing that felt like the only sane option left. You sold. Got out. Told yourself you'd stop the bleeding. Here's the part nobody warns you about in that moment. It recovered. Then it kept climbing. If you'd done nothing, genuinely nothing, that $12,000 would be worth over $19,000 today. You didn't lose that money because the market beat you. You lost it because of something that happens in your brain every single day, in ways far smaller than this too. Picture this instead. You're walking down the street and spot a $100 bill on the ground. You pick it up. Great day, right? That little rush of luck stays with you for a while. Now picture the opposite. You reach into your pocket later that same day and realize a $100 bill is gone. Same amount, same number on the bill, same actual impact on your bank account either way, but it doesn't feel the same, not even close. Losing that $100 hurts far more than finding one ever felt good. And this isn't just a personal quirk or something specific to you. It's one of the most consistent, most heavily documented patterns in how the human mind works. Once you understand why it happens, you'll start noticing it quietly running in the background of decisions you make almost every single day. Decisions about money, about relationships, about risk, about almost everything. So let's actually get into where this comes from. In the late 1970s, two psychologists named Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky started running a series of experiments. They'd ask people to choose between different bets involving gains and losses, and then track how people actually responded, not how classical economic theory said they should respond. Here's one of the simplest versions. Imagine you're offered a coin flip. Heads, you win $150. Tails, you lose $100. Mathematically, that's a fantastic bet. The expected value is clearly positive. Any purely rational calculator would take that bet every single time. But when Kahneman and Tversky ran versions of this experiment, most people refused. The possibility of losing $100 weighed more heavily in their minds than the chance of winning 50% more than that. What they found over and over across many variations of this experiment was that mathematically identical amounts of gain and loss did not feel identical at all. On average, people rated the pain of losing a sum of money as roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining that same amount, not slightly more intense, roughly double. They called this loss aversion. It became one of the founding discoveries of an entire field called behavioral economics. And this research eventually helped win Kahneman a Nobel Prize, decades later, in 2002. Tversky had passed away before the prize was awarded, and Nobel Prizes aren't given posthumously, which is part of why you've likely heard Kahneman's name far more than his research partners, even though the discovery belonged to both of them equally. Now here's the part that actually makes this make sense, instead of just sounding like a strange glitch in human psychology. Think about this from an evolutionary angle. For the overwhelming majority of human history, a loss wasn't just inconvenient. It could be fatal. Losing your stockpile of food right before winter didn't just mean a bad week. It could mean starvation. Losing shelter meant exposure. Losing the trust of your tribe could mean being left to survive completely alone in a hostile environment. A gain, on the other hand, was nice to have. More food than you need is a comfortable surplus, but it doesn't carry the same life or death urgency that a loss does. So across countless generations, the brains that treated potential losses as more urgent, more threatening, more worthy of immediate attention than equivalent gains were the brains that kept their owners alive long enough to pass that wiring on to the next generation. You're not broken. You're not overly emotional or bad with money because losses hit you harder than gains. You're running very old, very effective survival software in a modern world of paychecks, portfolios, and credit card statements, a world that software was never actually designed for. And once you know to look for it, loss aversion shows up absolutely everywhere in how people handle money in real life. Take investing. This is one of the clearest examples. People tend to hold on to losing stocks for far longer than makes rational sense, sometimes for years, riding a bad investment all the way down. Why? Because selling would make that loss official, permanent, real. As long as you haven't sold, some part of your brain can pretend the loss is only temporary, only on paper. Meanwhile, people tend to sell their winning stocks too early, locking in a small gain out of fear it might disappear. There's actually a name for this specific pattern in finance. It's called the disposition effect, and it's a direct descendant of loss aversion. It shows up in real estate too. Homeowners who bought at the peak of a market, right before a downturn, will frequently refuse to list their home anywhere near what it's actually worth now, holding out instead for the number they originally paid, even if that means sitting on the market for months or years longer than a realistically priced home would. The loss isn't rational to fight this hard against, but it feels unbearable to accept on paper, so people would rather wait indefinitely than make it official. Or take something as simple as an extended warranty at the electronics store. Statistically, these are usually a bad bet for the buyer. The odds of the product actually failing within the warranty period, multiplied by the cost of replacing it, is almost always less than what you pay for the warranty itself. But the small, painful possibility of a loss looms much larger in your mind than the math justifies, so people buy the warranty anyway. Marketing exploits this constantly, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Think about how often you see the phrase limited time offer, or only 3 left in stock, or don't miss out. None of these are technically lying to you about a discount, but notice the framing. They're not saying you'll get a good deal. They're saying you'll lose something if you don't act. That's not an accident. Framing something as an avoidable loss is measurably more motivating to the human brain than framing the exact same thing as a potential gain. Subscription services rely on the same wiring. Free trials are rarely designed to showcase a product out of pure generosity. They're designed to hand you something, let you get used to having it, and then let loss aversion do the rest of the work when the trial ends. Canceling suddenly feels like giving something up, even though a week earlier you didn't have it at all and were perfectly fine. Even something as everyday as budgeting can feel unusually emotionally draining, and loss aversion is part of why. Every time you tell yourself no to a purchase, some part of your brain doesn't register that as smart, disciplined restraint. It registers it closer to an actual loss, over and over all day long, which is exhausting in a way that saving money logically shouldn't be. This is part of why so many strict budgets quietly fall apart after a few weeks. It's not a failure of willpower so much as a war of attrition against a feeling that never lets up. So what do you actually do with all of this? The first thing is simply naming it when it's happening. When you notice you're refusing to sell a bad investment, or feeling unusually pressured by a countdown timer on a sale, or dreading a budget conversation more than the numbers alone would justify, pause and ask yourself honestly, is this loss aversion talking, or is this an actual rational concern? Second, there's a specific test you can run on investments. If you're on the fence about selling something that's lost value, ask yourself this. If I didn't already own this, would I buy it today, at this price right now? If the honest answer is no, then the fact that selling would make a loss official shouldn't be the thing holding you back. You're not avoiding a bad decision by holding on. You're just avoiding the discomfort of admitting one already happened. Third, when something feels urgent because you might miss out, slow down for just a moment and ask what's actually being framed as a loss here, and whether that framing is doing your thinking for you instead of the actual facts of the decision. Fourth, reframe your budget in terms of what you're building instead of what you're giving up. Loss aversion is triggered by the language of restriction, but the same dollar redirected toward a goal you actually care about doesn't register the same way in your mind, even though the math is identical. None of this means you should try to stop feeling losses more sharply than gains. That's probably not even possible, and it's not really the goal. Your brain isn't wrong to care more about losses, it's simply applying rules that were built for survival to a modern world of paychecks and portfolios that didn't exist when those rules were written. The people who actually handle money the best aren't the ones who've somehow eliminated this feeling. They're the ones who've learned to recognize it the moment it shows up and ask whether it's helping them or quietly running the show. That's the way I see it. Let me know what you think in the comments.